Awesome. Thank you very much, Akiva. Hi, everyone. My name is Cliff Mautner, and I've been a photographer for 41 years. It's been a long time, and I've shot so many different types of things. But today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about wedding photography and some peripheral elements that will help your wedding photography, specifically lighting, some gear, of course. And I really want to thank Adorama, but also the SanDisk people for having me on here and sponsoring this talk. SanDisk just came. I'm going to talk about it right now for a moment so I can, before I screen share. SanDisk just came out with this desktop drive, and it's about the size of a hockey puck. It's an 8 terabyte drive that has become really my storage solution. I'll talk a little bit about it. You can ask some questions. I don't want this to be a pitch. I am going to talk to you a little bit about some other things, but let's just jump in. I'm going to share my screen here and just kind of go into everything here. If I could just get that right there. Whenever I do these online seminars, it's always a little bit awkward because I'm talking to a little green light. There's no one here in my studio. It's empty. It is an echo. And so, sometimes it's a little bit awkward. Nobody to laugh at me or with me. If you want to learn a little bit more about me and follow me on social media, there's my Insta. I have a free education group, Cliff Mautner Photography, and I do some boot camps sporadically here and there, so you can subscribe to receive some information. A little bit about my background. In 1983, I started with a weekly, and that's really how long I've been doing this. I had no experience whatsoever. I saw an ad in the paper. I just went in. I had a pulse. I got hired. It literally is that simple. I spent 15 years with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Shot about 1,200 weddings after I left the Philadelphia Inquirer in 1998, and thousands of portrait sessions, commercial assignments, so on and so forth. I'm a very proud Nikon ambassador with the United States, and blah, blah, blah. Won a few grand awards, won a few things in my life. And really cool award was the Leadership Medal from the United Nations. So that was very, very cool. But 952 students from 42 countries have come to my workshop to learn about light. That's also something I'm very, very proud of. There's a little bit of my gear. I do obviously have more than that, but you can take a screen cap, you can do what you want with it, but I do use all of these things. It takes 10,000 hours to truly master anything. The old 10,000 hour thing. That was from Malcolm Gladwell. There's my beast, my Z8. A little bit about my workflow, if you will. I'm using SanDisk Professional Pro Cinema cards. These are CF Express cards in my Z8s. And the Z8s are my workhorses right now. There's my card reader. This is a little very lightweight, very transportable transfer drive. There's some of my high capacity storage. I have multiple drives like this. I back up things 3 times. And there's the brand new little hockey puck. You can see that there and how small that is. Don't think. Thinking is the enemy of creativity. It's not conscious. Anything self-conscious is lousy. You can't try to do things. You simply must do things. I spent 17 years as a photojournalist and then wedding photography. I mean, it's not exactly a natural transference, if you will. You don't just do something and then do something else and expect it to be seamless. This is a scene, a wonderful experience I had in Liberia, West Africa, where I was doing a story on Operation Smile, an organization that does surgery on children and birth defects with deformities. This girl had a cleft lip and a cleft palate. But, can you imagine the mindset of telling stories like this and then going into weddings? I didn't know these things. I really didn't understand portraiture. I didn't know how to make a woman look beautiful? There were so many different things I didn't know. How do you pose people? How do you pose a group? With the exception of a little flash, and flash in my day was putting a bounce card on a Vivitar 283. That's a long time ago. But I was able to find interesting moments, but I really didn't know how to make people look beautiful or flatter people. It was not a natural transition. So all of these things, anticipation, reaction, uh, the quality of light, which I'm going to get into, not the quantity. There is a big difference. The transition from weddings, or I should say from photojournalism into weddings, it didn't create a transition in style, however. So pure photojournalism, when it came to my wedding work, I really did conjure up ideas and observe things as a photojournalist. This is a little girl. She was running around like a chicken without a head. And the only person that could actually control this little girl was her dad, her granddad, rather. So the granddad, giving up his duties as the father of the bride, chasing around this little girl so that she wasn't a disruption. Just anticipation and reaction, being able to find that little sliver of light behind the bride was really a treat when I was able to just put it in the right place. And the moment was really lovely in our grand basilica here, the Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul in Philadelphia. No, I did not Photoshop Jesus in that photograph. So just saying. I've actually been accused of that, believe it or not. This was in Mexico, Playa del Secreto, and it was right before the ceremony. So I'm showing you these things before ceremonies, this pre-ceremony type of stuff, because, and this is actually post-ceremony. To me, some of the best photographs, some of the best moments happen right before or right after a ceremony. This particular image, immediately following the ceremony, really brings to mind an understanding that they were talking to each other, basically saying, we can't believe what we just did. And he's looking at it thinking, what did I just do? A processional, moments right before they're about to walk down the aisle. But one of the things I started to learn and understand how to make better pictures as a wedding photographer was that I learned that I could set the stage for moments to take place without staging the moments. As a photojournalist, you don't set up or stage any moments whatsoever. But the rules, well, there are no rules for wedding photography, but my style was as a photojournalist, but I really wanted to bring some of that to weddings. So I set the stage for moments. I set the light. I set the compositional scenarios. This girl, Kate, one of my brides from many years ago, asked me, would you like to, I have a letter. Would you like to photograph me reading this letter to Stephen? And I said, sure. She said, where would you like me to read it? I said, right here in this really good light. So this was like, stealing candy from a baby, so to speak. But I want to point out that I had nothing to do with the placement of these bridesmaids behind her. Just simply placing people in the best lighting situations, being able to take this bride and put her in a spot where the light was just hitting her just right. The rest is up to them. The rest is up to the bride. They're not my moments. These are her moments. The drama of light exists not only in what is in the light, but also what is left dark. If the light is everywhere, the drama is gone. J. Maisel is clearly one of the greatest photographers of any time. And if you've never heard him speak, if he ever does speak again, I urge you to listen to him. I actually saw him at Adorama, amongst many other places. Anytime that I had a chance to listen to Jay, I did. And I learned quite a bit from him. He's very, very incredible. But taking that mantra, that idea, and using it in a way that creates dramatic images. A friend of mine named Dave Black, a fellow Nikon ambassador, said to me one time, again, along the lines of what Jay said, Dave said to me, if you want to make a photograph look interesting, light only part of it. And I was very careful where the light was going to be placed. This is one single light on this model here. This was a campaign for, I believe it was a Nikon 780. So if I ever had to be quoted for anything in photography, I hope it's this one. And I've said this for a long time, and I like to be known as the guy who makes shadow is my canvas and light is my paint. And that really is the way I think about light. Juxtaposition of highlights and shadows and being able to create the drama instead of lighting everything in the scene. Can you imagine, for example, if I took a flash and I used it on my camera, or I used it anywhere for that matter, the drama is gone, as Jay would say, if you lit everything here. So just once again, the quintessential juxtaposition of highlights and shadows. This was a bride that was overlooking the scene for where her ceremony was unfolding, and she was just observing her guests coming in. And I put a long lens on. I'm right outside the doorway, and I saw her doing this. I saw the light on her face. By the way, I moved a little bit to my left. If you were able to see a cursor, which you can't, I don't believe, I would show you exactly where I wanted the light to fall, which is right on the bridge of her nose and that little bit on her face and forehead. But I definitely didn't want the nose to break the plane of where the shadow met the light. So I moved a little bit left so the composition could really enhance the light. So sometimes you have to move just a little bit. It's like a dance with the composition to see the light. Again, a little bit of shadow on the right side to give the image some dimension. There are no bad pictures. That's just how your face looks sometimes, said Lincoln. And when you look at an image like this of this was actually during a workshop, I was trying to show the students that you don't shoot close-up tight portraits of a woman with a 35 millimeter lens. And that's what this was. It was a 35 millimeter. I got way too close. And the difference between this image and this image is vast. Being able to shoot tight, if you want to flatter a woman, don't use anything wider than an 85. Now, don't mistake that for me saying don't shoot portraits with a wide lens, because sometimes portraits can be, very interesting with a wide lens. But I'm not going to flatter a bride shooting with a 35 close. So that I do stand by. Just a couple more of these. It's, sort of a signature shot of mine to go tight with a little bit of shadow, if you will. And before most of my weddings, if I have a few moments, I'm going to try to make an image like this of my brides. This is from many years ago. One of the other things I like to point out in terms of just good wedding photography is the timeless nature of someone's style or work. Some of these images that I'm showing are over 20 years old. This one here was, I think I captured this in 2004. So it's now 21 years old. So let's talk about lenses for a second. Lens selection is critical. Just as though I wouldn't use a 35 millimeter lens to shoot a tight close-up portrait of a woman, I think long lenses just simply flatter people and make images look, gives them more impact, if you will. This is a 14 millimeter lens, and this very next frame, probably focal length of around 150. And if you look at these two images, the only thing that's really changed is where I stood and the focal length, the compression, bringing that background into the frame, bringing that background closer to the subject, compressing the scenario. That's what added impact to this photograph. Of course, the moment of them not touching one another and almost touching is probably more impactful than a touch. But really, it's the technical aspects of the lens selection and other things going on that give this image impact. I mentioned the word dimension before. The direction of light is what creates dimension. If you can find the juxtaposition of shadows and highlights, the direction here coming from behind her, this is backlight. That's what creates dimension in this photograph. This was, I believe this was 2003 or 4. And, my style really started to develop after I understood that if I played around with light with different directions, whether it be shooting into it or allowing it to fall on my subjects from different directions, I can create images that really spoke to me, that had much more of a feel to them than images with flat light. When I took this image many years ago, this is Rembrandt, and if you look at Rembrandt's work, or you look at any of the other phenomenal impressionists, the way they use light, Caravaggio and people like that, the light is not even. There's shadows, there's highlights. That's what gives the images the impact, whether it's a painting or a photograph. So, I'm very moved by this image. I'm very influenced by images like this where, again, has a juxtaposition of shadows and highlights. And I will go on a little bit of a judgmental rant here and say that I think a lot of the younger photographers today don't really take lighting or the direction of lighting into account. I think far too often, more light is better light. Flat light is good light. To me, flat light is boring. The light and airy look, if it's a deliberate style for some images, I think it's lovely, but I just wouldn't want to have that for an entire day. My eye, for example, goes straight to the little girl's face here, and that's the brightest part of the scene. And her highlight is juxtaposed against some darker areas behind her. Otherwise, you wouldn't even see the highlight. So that's what I mean by juxtaposition of shadows and highlights. This is one of my favorite wedding preparation scenarios. This is Oheka Castle in Long Island. And this is set up. This is not a candid per se. I saw the light on her face. She wanted to give the bride, which is her aunt, she wanted to give the bride a little letter. And I said, stand here in this good light. And I backed off and I made a picture or two and, created this image, which I really like. And once again, just working with the shadows and highlights. Imagine this image if I had blasted a flash. I think it would have destroyed the mood. So this is a wonderful example of the fact that more light is not better light. Again, that light just wrapping around her moments before her ceremony. The direction of light, the light is coming from camera left, as you can see. She's gazing off in the direction of the light, and I put the groom behind her with a long lens, and that little bit of shadow on the other side of his face is what really gives this image its dimension. So, some more wedding prep, being able to, again, play around with light. Sometimes I don't get a juxtaposition of shadows and highlights. Sometimes it's a juxtaposition of highlights against shadows. Sometimes it's shadows against highlights. In this particular instance, there were no shadows to juxtapose the highlights against. I just exposed properly. Those are just really, really bright blinds behind them. I blew out the blinds and made a light and airy photo. I like this picture, actually. It's a lovely moment. And then perhaps the exact opposite of this image is this image, where I had a dark background and just used the highlights coming from a window to camera right and just put a little bit of light on them. This is also another wonderful example of the quality of light over the quantity of light. There's not a whole light coming in that window. Pardon me. There's not a lot of light coming through the window. So my camera settings were probably somewhere around a 60th of a second at maybe 2 or so because I wanted them both in focus, probably ISO 3200 or so, somewhere in that neighborhood. So there wasn't a lot of light. So keep that in mind. You don't need a lot of light to make beautiful images with quality light. So just a few more just prep stuff with the understanding that the direction of the light is what creates dimension. Or sometimes there's a lack of direction. It's coming straight at me. So years ago when I did my workshops in my studio here, and I was kind of known as a guy that was able to make light or I should say make images in really harsh light. I did a Nikon behind the scenes video several years ago, and I made this image to demonstrate just how crappy light could be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And how would I go about making an image in harsh, horrible, just unflattering light at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? And the answer was kind of simple. I just turn them around and I have my subject between me and the sun. I put their backs to the sun and I expose for their faces. Now, there is no reflector here. There is no fill light. There's no flash. There's no, Stella Pro continuous light, which I'll talk about a little bit later. This is just simply turning them around, having the sun come at their back, exposing for their faces properly. And there is a direct line between the sun, the subject, and me. So keeping your subject between you and the sun, exposing for faces, is a really good way if you don't have any artificial light with you. It's a great way to expose properly, and it really kind of looks nice. Now, yes, I lost the veil. The veil's blown out. There's some hot spots on the head, but this is wedding photography. It's not rocket science. I really have to move quickly. Here's one more frame of that. So when dealing with harsh light, shade is not the answer, nor is it my preference. Put your subject between you and the sun, expose for faces, not veils, because the faces will be underexposed. And sometimes it's a compromise, but it's worth it. Make bad light good light. This is a first look. It's about 1:30 in the afternoon. This was, it's a long story, but I won't get into it because it takes too long. But very briefly, there was a planner that kept delaying things and delaying things and delaying things. I had already picked out a great spot for a first look, and then, an hour later, the light moved. So you have to adapt. I put them between me and the sun, exposed properly, and made a nice picture out of it. So skin colors, skin tones. I am asked, and it's a frequently asked question, how do you photograph people of color? And I'm even asked, how do you photograph a light complected person when you have them in the same frame as a dark complected person? Well, the answer is properly. I expose for them properly. This wonderful couple, I don't want to overexpose their faces. The highlights is what I'm exposing for here. And I think this is a pretty good example of how you should expose for people of color. And in this instance, we had a fairly light complected bride and a dark complected groom. And I'm just exposing for them like I would anybody else. Exposure is exposure is exposure. I just happen to use a little rim light from the backlight there, creating a nice mood. But, it's the highlights that are giving Max, my groom, his definition, his dimension there. And it's also hitting our bride's rim light as well. And again, I don't have to overexpose for him. I don't have to underexpose for her. Same kind of thing here. This is, an amazing wedding that I did. I don't even remember how many years ago, but the sun was a little bit above camera right. So I decided to place them in the light very carefully so that the highlights would hit Nicole on the left. And I thought it was a nice balance of the light. Once again, that little sliver of light hitting Nicole's face. This is I have it here with me in the studio, but it's a great picture of it. This is my preferred fill light. It's a continuous light source, and it's a Light in Motion Stella CLX 10,000 lumen continuous light. Incredible battery life. Right now, I'm being lit by one to my front left, and I have one in a gobo cookie or a cookie gobo hitting the brick behind me, and they have incredibly long lives. The battery life is, a few hours, if you will, and I use this to fill. And sometimes I don't want to use a strobe or a flash or something of that sort. So I'm just using this to give me a little bit of fill and a little bit of catch light in the eyes. And this is a phenomenal light source for me. I use it outside. And those frames where I was putting the subjects back to the light and putting my subjects between me and the sun, that was before I had one of these lights. And now I can get catch lights in the eyes instead of dead eyes by using this light source. And you can see that wonderful little catch light in this bride's eye. So it's a great light source. It's a great use of fill, and a great use of fill here in that it was a flat day in Manhattan, very flat, overcast. And I wanted it to look like it was, natural light, and it does look very natural. I wanted this to look like it was the sun. It was not. It's an artificial light. It's my Light in Motion Stella CLX 10. My assistant behind the bride, camera right, hitting her, making it look like it was the sun, and using a long lens, compressing it, yada, yada, yada. And, came away with a photo here that worked pretty well on a rooftop in Manhattan. Emulating sunlight. This was another really flat day. Again, this is my assistant behind the couple, okay? Just carefully shooting up at them a little bit, making it look like there was some light behind them. This is the wonderful actress Shobha Narayan, Broadway star, and a friend, I call her, working with her again soon during her wedding. And this is the Stella to my camera left, just giving me a nice little kicker of the light because the window light just wasn't giving me what I wanted. Playing around with white balance. I put a tungsten head in the light, changed my white balance to tungsten on the camera. This is sort of at dusk. And so what happens to the sky? It goes deep blue. So play around with that. Try different white balances, different gels on your light sources, and play around a little bit. Getting to some of the finer things about wedding photography and the more intricate elements besides just technical things is I ask questions when I'm shooting these weddings or before I'm getting ready to shoot and I'm discussing things with the couple. This gentleman here, he was just made a commissioned officer. It was incredibly important to him that he be depicted as an officer. And he wanted his medals. He wanted to be holding these things. Frankly, I didn't know exactly what they meant. I didn't know exactly what they were. And but I know that he found them very important. And I just set up a portrait quickly. And that's another thing I want to point out. Wedding photography, like photojournalism, you've got to be fast. And you don't have, 5 minutes to set up a photo. Sometimes you only have 15 seconds. This was a scene in this couple's home, a very traditional family, and I just basically placed them in this scenario. There's nothing terribly exciting or creative about it, but it works. And I bet you this photograph is going to be relevant to this family 50 years from now, just like it would look 50 years ago. He had a child. He was getting married. He and his wife were getting married. He had a child, and his father had passed, but the child was named after this gentleman. And I saw the photo on the night table, and I asked about it. So ask questions. This was a very important picture for him. Once again, mom was not able to make the wedding because she's deceased. It was a very emotional time for these people, but she brought this photo that she was going to display, and I asked her to hold it. This is one of my favorite portraits of all time, to be honest with you. This was a wedding in a synagogue, and they had a little Holocaust memorial inside the synagogue. And I noticed the tattoo on the gentleman's arm. He was the grandfather of the groom. And they're Holocaust survivors, both of them. So I asked them if they wouldn't mind posing for a portrait in front of the Holocaust memorial at the synagogue. And you can just see the life in these people. You can see how long they've been together. I could feel it when I was looking through my lens, and I just love the feel of it. He's, kind of serious, and she's a little bit less so. So ask questions. I'm going to show some wedding portraits. This is a first look, and I kind of bunch the first look into wedding portraits because I think I can make wedding portraits during the first look that are, kind of real, if you will. And I put her in the best lighting situation, best compositional scenario, and I just allowed them to just do their thing. And that's what I do with my portraits. I put people in good lighting. I just let people do their thing. I put people in good compositional scenarios. So I'm placing them in situations where I can succeed. He was a terrible saxophone player, but wanted to play the sax for her. She's just kind of getting a kick out of everything. I love this gentleman. He was a model for many workshops of mine, and I had the honor of shooting his wedding last year. And that's his wife, Samantha. So portraiture, first looks, portraiture. I really enjoy them. Simplicity. This is a rule of composition that I use probably more than any other, if I use any rules at all. An image doesn't have to have convoluted composition. We don't have to play Where's Waldo with anybody when we do these things. This is a bride that is just posing for me, if you will. I'm just using some light. This is City Hall in Philadelphia, one of my favorite spots to make pictures. Just, again, playing around with highlights and shadows. So it's very, very simple. This was part of the ad campaign for the Z9. Excuse me while I sip some water. Ad campaign for the Z9. This was my 105 1.4E on the Z9 with the adapter. And, I wanted to show and demonstrate the eye autofocus in that camera. This is wide open at 1.4. But I was very careful with my background. I wanted something very, very simple. That's her grandmother's dress that she was wearing. And there was something, the feel about this image that I really enjoyed. And that's why I continue to show it. But there's a simplicity to it. Once again, simple. This is my 85 1.2. All of these things, I believe you can get at Adorama. And the feel of the 85 1.2, the 105 1.4 was my favorite lens until this came out. And now my 105 1.4 sits at home on weddings. And it's very sad. Once again, the 85 1.2, one of my favorite lenses. It does not come off my camera very often. Once again, just simplicity. This is just direct sunlight. Juxtaposing shadows and highlights. This is a very long time ago. Again, just a nice wide open aperture with some backlight and a beautiful bride. When you're doing environmental portraits, and this is Philadelphia, a place called Belmont Plateau. And when you're doing these things, I think it's really important to use longer lenses so that you can put the photo into context. I've seen images at Belmont Plateau where people used wide lenses, and the city looked so far behind the subject that you could barely make out the skyline. So lens selection is really important in these types of situations. This is Four Seasons in Philadelphia. And again, just kind of placing the couple in a scene that is, even though the Four Seasons is not that old, this is sort of an iconic scene in Philly now. They have beautiful flowers, and the view is spectacular, and the place is absolutely immaculate. That's why the reflection is so defined. But if I had chosen to go tighter on them, I would not have really put them into context. And once again, this is an environmental portrait, and this is the skyline of Philadelphia, taken on the 33rd floor of the Loews Hotel. This is Helsinki, Finland, again, taken with a 70 to 200, probably racked out at around 135. But if I had gotten close with a 24 to 70, I really think the distortion would have taken over, and I don't think it would have been as interesting. And of course, Central Park, getting any tighter would really have eliminated the sense of place. Ceremonies. But you know what I'm going to do first? I'm going to jump to the chat, if I can find it here. Let's see here. Where is the chat? I'm going to stop the screen sharing, and I'm going to take a couple of questions here. All right. Question from Jerry. If you have no assistant, what's your preferred method of using on-camera flash? Well, Jerry, I don't use on-camera flash very often at all, but when I do, I use something called a flash bender on it. I generally only use on-camera flash when I'm just kind of shooting, group dancing towards the end of the evening, and that's really about the only time I'm putting a flash on my camera. But it is important to diffuse that, and the flash bender is my preferred modifier. Question from Thomas, how do you keep your color balance consistent? Well, in my Z8s and all of my Nikon bodies, I'm basically going to choose Auto 1 or Auto 2. One keeps the warmth, one cools those warm colors. But essentially, I'm shooting everything raw. The white balance, the auto white balance in these cameras has gotten so good, I don't really have to care about white balance. And my post-processing, which I'm going to get into a little later, called aftershoot, white balance is pretty much an afterthought now. It just doesn't really matter to me in camera because the auto white balances are so good. Question from Liz, if you can only shoot one lens, what would it be? What software do you use to prefer? All right, so the software I prefer to use to edit is Lightroom, and I use something called Aftershoot for my weddings. And I'll show you that later. Shot list. No, I really don't want to get into shot lists because I don't really use them. But I will talk about my favorite lens. It's like asking, who's my favorite daughter, Samantha or Allison? They're tools. And, the most common answer would probably be the 24 to 70 with most people, but it's not for me. I have a 24 to 70, I have a 7200. I bring a lot of glass to a wedding. I bring a lot of glass to all of my assignments. But I think choosing one lens is somewhat irresponsible. However, I think Nikon just came out with a 28 to 300 or a 24 to 300. I think that's pretty spanky, but again, if I'm shooting a wedding, it's just not the lens I'm going to choose. So I don't mean to evade the question, but I really don't have one lens that I can choose. I have favorite lenses. My 85 1.2 is my favorite lens right now. I hope that helps. Do you use flash indoors and outdoors? Yes, of course. Outdoors, I'll tend to use large flash. I'll use Pro Photos. I'll use Westcott's. I like my Westcott FJ200. If I need more light, I'll use my Pro Photo. But the FJ is a 200 watt second light. And then I use this. This is my Stella 10,000 lumen continuous light. I'm not going to turn it on because it's going to, cause horrific exposure here. But this is a light source that I use outside. It's not a flash. It's a fill light. And it really can be a main light. It's really wonderful. So that's the light that I use. I use flash inside all the time for my wedding receptions, especially, and also I'll use some type of flash for my family portraits, always. And I'm going to get into flash in a little bit. Question from Milton. What software is used to send photos to the client? Well, I'm using something called CloudSpot. It's an online gallery. It's not exactly a software. I hope that helps. CloudSpot is phenomenal. I'm not going to get into pricing, Milton. What does the average photographer charge for 4 to 6 well? Your mileage may vary, and it's also very geographical. I'll answer a couple more of these questions in a bit. I just wanted to get to some of them. And I'm going to go back here to the program. And where are we here? Oh, can we move this over here? Here we go. Good. So ceremonies. All right. So we have the pre-ceremony, we have the ceremony, we have the post-ceremony. A lot of Jewish weddings, we have something called a ketubah signing. And Nikki and Liz here, they had this amazing ceremony, amazing wedding up in upstate New York. And this was during their ketubah signing. And I just thought the juxtaposition of their skin colors and just the gentleness and the passion that these women shared for one another was really very moving to witness. And this is one of my favorite images from this. But, you know, ceremonies and pre-ceremonies, if you will, things that happen, they're very emotional. And I said before, you can make some of the best photos of the day during these times. So be observant and don't just wait up into in the front of the church or synagogue or wherever it might be. You know, it's the action's not happening there. This was a wonderful photograph in Villanova at the chapel there. Again, just literally 2 minutes before the ceremony. Seconds before the ceremony, where he was about to walk his daughter down the aisle. Groom waiting in the sacristy. When you get to the church, if you can't find the groom, go find him. He's probably in the sacristy if it's a church wedding. So ceremonies, you really have to take your time and you really have to observe. What I was going to say about this image, sometimes light doesn't go your way. And the sun was pouring in, and no matter what you do, it's not going to go your way. But if you just wait, maybe it'll kick in. Maybe the light will change. And I got lucky towards the end of the ceremony. But sometimes the light screws you, and that's kind of my point. Or sometimes there is no light, like in the Franklin Institute planetarium. This was horrific light. If I told you my settings, you wouldn't believe me. You know, some absurd figures years ago. Back in the day, it's like 12,800. It's noisy. It's just, I'm probably hand holding it like a 30th at 1.4 at 12,800. Obscene ISOs and obscene exposure values. But sometimes you have to do it. And then sometimes we all, as wedding photographers, get screwed this way where the light's just coming from directly overhead. We can't decide what time these people are going to get married. And we can't tell these people, you got to move the direction of your ceremony. So you just have to do what you can to expose properly. This is a terrible photograph. I apologize for making it. I almost apologize for showing it, but I wanted to let everybody know that sometimes you're simply screwed. Nothing you can do. And then sometimes, like I showed this image earlier, sometimes it's serendipitous, that little light behind them. Or sometimes you get the perfect balance of the New York City skyline and the sun on your subject. Or sometimes you get the rainbow. You got to be ready. This image, I love this image. And this image was made in a Russian Orthodox church in Manhattan, probably 2 or 3 months ago. And they were in an area of the church just about a minute before that the light was very flat, much like the people aside from them in the church. The light's very flat. Well, they moved forward and they just stood in this light for several minutes. And I was able to make image after image after image. in this absolutely heavenly light. And, again, just as much as we get screwed, sometimes we get lucky. We got to be prepared for that. Maybe the most intimidating, technically problematic portion of the day are family pictures. But let me tell you something, they are important. People dread them. I don't dread them. I know how to light them. I do them quickly. I do them beautifully. This is my family. This is my grandmother's wedding. The bride is my grandmother. I could not tell you what year this is, but this is probably 1930, somewhere in that neighborhood. I really couldn't tell you. Yeah, my grandmother was 96 years old when she passed in 2003. So do the math. I really couldn't tell you. But look at how this image stands the test of time. It's beautifully done. Absolutely beautifully done. And really, this hasn't changed. Look at how they are not stacking heads. What I mean by that is there's not someone standing directly behind someone's head. And I think it's a really beautiful example of how to do a family portrait the right way. So when we do these things, we have to understand flash, okay? Because I'm not just going to go out and shoot my family pictures with available light. I think it's a mistake. I think it's lazy. I don't want to be a natural light photographer with my weddings because I think I'm doing my clients a disservice. So I'm going to balance my light. I'm going to explain this in a bit, but I'm basically going to take my exposure values of the scene, the ambient light exposure value, whatever I'm dealing with. I'm going to set my camera about a stop below or so the ambient light in that scene, and then I'm going to use some type of flash light source and expose my subjects properly. I hope that explains it. This is underneath a mandap at a South Asian event where, again, I'm just using flash to fill. I'm balancing the light with the scene. I have to use flash in a way that is not going to, blow out the background. And I'm not using flash in a way that, is not going to underexpose the scene as well. So I'm trying to balance the light here between the flowers and the chandelier and bring those down a little bit. So I'll use my shutter speed to speed up a little bit so I can bring the brightness of the chandelier down. Sometimes I need 1,000 watt seconds. These are 2 pro photos for a big bridal party, and this bridal party was large, yes, but they're also standing in some open shade during the middle of the day with a lot of light. So I needed a lot of power. So that person that asked me, do I use flash indoors and outdoors? I absolutely do. And this is the perfect example of how I need big flash outside. Need a lot of watt seconds, a lot of power here. And even my Westcott, which is a great little 200 watt second light, wasn't going to cut it. I needed more power. So I believe I shot this, and I want to explain to people the relationship between shutter speed and flash. This was a wedding in Puerto Vallarta, and it rained all day. And I had to take some family pictures outside. No, it's not a great picture, but I had to do the family pictures in a way that was acceptable. And I needed to get a little bit of, ambient light from the background coming in. And, I was shooting at, a 60th and 80th and whatever. I'm shooting these at about I think it's a 1/10 of a second. I can't see it because something's covering it. I don't have a cursor to move it. I'm not going to waste time doing that. But I believe Photo Mechanic here says 1/10 of a second. Yes, you can shoot and hand hold at a 1/10 of a second because the flash duration freezes the action. Flash duration freezes action. So you can control your shutter speed. You can slow it down. You can speed it up. But when you slow it down, you add more ambient light into your frame, okay? And it will freeze the action. Sometimes you have to go into high speed sync. This is probably at around 1/5000th of a second at probably 1.4 with my 105. This is Shobha Narayan, the actress again. And this is overlooking the Hudson River. So when I'm using flash outside, all right, using high speed sync, I can bring down the background a great deal. And no, I did not light the Hudson River. That's the sun. But in order to get this to look this way, I had to use high-speed sync to bring, use a very fast shutter speed to bring down that background this way. And there is the, again, I can't, the settings are up there. It's covered on my screen and I can't see it. Probably what, maybe 2500th of a second, 3200th of a second, somewhere around there. All right. Again, high-speed sync. This is the middle of the day on a very cold day. Believe it or not, it's about 20 degrees. And Corey Wade, who's a wonderful model, I'm shooting his wedding in November. Can't wait for that. But again, high-speed synchronization. Learn a little bit about it. Learn how to control your backgrounds by using high-speed sync. And it's quite rewarding and it's really simple. So there's a couple more. So flash balance with ambient, portraits and reception. So let's talk about this a little bit. I wanted to show what I tried to do and why it didn't look very good, because I like to show my mistakes. I thought maybe I can get away with using just a Stella, meaning a continuous light for this one, and I obviously could not. It might look okay to the naked eye, but it really isn't okay. I used the Stella. I didn't like the way it looked because I didn't like the background. I could not control the background because I could not speed up the shutter because I'm attempting to get an exposure value with a continuous light. And when I used flash, that's when I was able to bring the background down by speeding the shutter. Shutter speed plays no role whatsoever with flash exposure. Let me explain that again. Flash exposure is not affected by your shutter speed. The only time it's affected, the exposure is affected by your shutter speed, is when you go too slow with your shutter speed and you overexpose the scene, or if you go into high-speed synchronization, okay, and there's not enough power with your flash. So in this particular situation, I don't remember my settings, what it was probably somewhere around 1/60th of a second at f4, probably around 400 ISO. But if I sped my shutter, the background would be darker. If I slowed my shutter, the background would get lighter. And you're controlling the ambiance of your photo, the feel, the essence of really what the decorator is trying to accomplish with their lighting, controlling it with your shutter speed and a good use of your flash. I also modified my flash here where I used a grid, okay, a grid on my flash. I believe I was using the FJ here, so that I can control the dispersion of the light. It's an angle reducer. That's why the hands and the bottom of their outfits are a little bit darker, because I wanted to make the focus of the frame their faces. And there you see everything I did in Photo Mechanic. You see the exposure values. And again, I can't see anything. I have something covering it. Couple more of those. Controlling the ambiance with your flash. So if you can, go available. I don't mind going available. If the quality of the light is there at a reception, talking about basics here, I'll go available. I have no problem with that. I'm symbiotic with my assistant. So the question that someone might ask is, do you always use an assistant at a wedding? The answer is absolutely, positively yes. I don't believe that I can do the same thing that I do with a light stand. I call them voice-activated light stands. I didn't create it, stole it from somebody, but yes, a VAL, voice-activated light stand. I'm looking to create texture with my light. So that light is always coming from some type of direction. That's why I have my assistant constantly moving in order to place that light where I want it. Manual flash is more consistent than TTL through the lens metering. Many reasons why. I'm not going to go into it here. I go into it probably in depth for like an hour or so at a workshop, but we don't have that here. So manual flash, meaning the flash puts out the same amount of power. You determine how much light that flash puts out, as opposed to the exposure controlling the light. I basically, and this is a good rule of thumb, I stay about 2 stops under the ambient light reading at a wedding to make it look natural. So I'm about 2 stops under the ambient, and I use my flash, expose these subjects properly, and I generally um, uh, maintain the ambiance of the event. So it's about 2 stops under the ambient. That's what you're seeing here. So it's not black backgrounds unless you want a black background. So it's probably a 250th of a second. I wanted to eliminate everything behind them. I had my assistant go back there. This is actually during their meal, and they're just kind of flirting with each other, and I told them to keep flirting with each other. So it's sort of staged, but not so much staged. They were really doing this. And I had my assistant go behind them, and I grabbed a few frames of them doing this, again, just during the actual meal. Controlling the background with fast shutter speeds. They were clearing tables during the toasts, which really irritates me. If any of you are wedding photographers out there and are irritated as well by people clearing during toast because you have, plates in the background and people moving in the background, well, you can eliminate them by using a really fast shutter speed. And then just controlling the ambiance. I don't know, I probably shot this at a 25th of a second or so, 30th of a second, 15th of a second. I'm not shooting my reception images at a 60th of a second. No need. Once again, just controlling the balance of the light with your shutter speed. Probably around a 30th of a second here, so that the ambiance lighting that the client paid for gave a feel to the actual reception. You want to capture that. Candlelight only. This is the Z9. This is a Z9 ad, if you will. They were a real client of mine, though. I asked them to work with me. And again, this is just candlelight. So sometimes towards the end of the evening, I'll just make some pictures with candlelight. With the cameras that we have today, it's a really nice opportunity to do so. This is actually the same venue. I just, there's candles there. I put a couple extra candles there and waited for them to actually interact. And this is real. This is not staged. This one's staged. This one's real. And then, the cameras that we have today, the lenses that we have today, to be able to do something like this was just not possible years ago. To be able to make a picture with an 85 at 1.2 at ISO 6400 here, to be able to create this and have it look this way without having to use flash. Sometimes flash is great, but sometimes flash doesn't give you the mood that you see with the naked eye. And I think that's what's so great about going in there and being able to go available. Sometimes, using the ambiance lighting at the event can work well for you. As long as your shutter speed stays fast enough, you can do it. Again, just no flash here. This is just the exposure from the sparklers. This image was created to look like natural light. It was made to look like it was being lit with that little beacon in the background, but it's actually my assistant squatting down behind them with a flash. And the other important part of this photograph to note is that I played around with the shutter speed, sped it up, slowed it down, so that I would get to the desired look of the scenario that I was creating with the Liberty Tower, New York City skyline behind them. Faster shutter speed and the sky would be too dark. Slower shutter speed and the sky would have been too bright. And of course, sometimes the flash duration is really great with rain. They didn't mind. I didn't mind. It was the end of the night. Just wiped off my cameras and stuck it in the bag and went home. And then another example, if you look behind me, this is actually taken in this studio. I was playing around with slow shutter speeds, and this is a great example of how flash duration freezes action. I believe this is a 1/10 of a second with this girl in midair. So I wanted to really demonstrate how your flash duration works. You can freeze action when your camera settings are below the ambient light reading. You'll freeze action. And there you'll see all the data in the upper right. I'm going to take a look at the questions if there are some now. Let's see here. All right. Hi, I am an aspiring wedding photographer. How does work come your way? Well, search engine optimization. That's probably the most important in today's world. I hope this isn't too funky a transition, but I didn't want to ignore these questions when I finish up. I'm still going to go another 15 minutes or so. Search engine optimization, referrals from venues, referrals from planners, referrals from past clients. Word of mouth is still, keenly important, but search engine optimization to find you is incredibly important. And then let's see. How do you go about carving out sufficient time with the couple during the wedding day so you can deliver what they've requested? That's a wonderful question. Maz, it's from. Well, 20-something years ago, 25 years ago, I started doing something called a first look. And I don't know if I was the very first to do it, but I sort of popularized it. I'm not afraid to say it. I am the one that did it. I spoke about it in Vegas at WPPI, and I kind of regret it because I think it's turned into something silly. But it was really meant to give more time for photographers to get portraits of the couple before the wedding. And so what you can do is talk about the first look and time it right so that you can get a little bit more time with the client. But the other way, perhaps the best way, is to kindly explain to people that timelines are never for real and that hair and makeup artists, as beloved as they are and as diligent as they are, because of their diligence, at times things run late, okay? There are some that are amazing and there's some that just don't care about your time. And so time tends to get away. So what I say to my clients is we have to BS everybody and we have to add more time because the time is never going to be there. So your timing has to be padded. And you have to be honest with the client and tell them that you're adding more time. This is going to solve your problem. So never take a timeline at its word is really what I'm saying. How will I know what the ambient lighting is? Well, I won't know what the ambient lighting is until I actually encounter it. But then, not to sound snide, but 41 years of experience is going to let me know what to do. But the ambient light reading is simply what's existing right now. What is existing in my studio? Right now I'm being lit by an umbrella, okay, and a continuous light, and I have a light hitting the background there. But if I turn the lights out, well, that's my ambient light of sort. You go outside, your ambient light is going to have one reading. You go inside, your ambient light is going to have another reading. You can have they used to make something called a light meter. That would give you an ambient light reading. You have meters in your camera. You can get an ambient light reading with your camera, but you need something to use that is 18% gray or close to it in order to get a proper ambient light reading. The other way you can do it is to just take the picture. You have mirrorless cameras. You can look through the electronic viewfinder and you can see what the ambient light reading is and just adjust the settings and you'll come to what your ambient light reading is. And then if you're talking about a flash, take your shutter speed, speed it up 2 stops, use your flash to fill in. And that's sort of the best way I can explain it here and now because I'm a little bit pressed for time. But that's a good question. All right, I'm going to go back here, and this image here was very confusing because these bulbs were incredibly bright. I needed to capture this carousel in a way that showed movement, and it was very difficult. If I showed you the settings, and I'm going to probably do that right there, these settings were kind of crazy. I believe I shot this at, In fact, I can't really see it. I think it was like ISO 50, F16 or F22, like 1/10 of a second or less, 1/4 of a second, probably, somewhere in that neighborhood. And, this is another great example of when you are far enough below the ambient light reading, your flash will freeze the action. So this answers that person question, before, um, in that you get your ambient light, you work with your flash, you accomplish what you need to do just by trial and error. This thing probably took me 3 or 4 tries before I got it right. That flash had to be very, very, very close to the subject. My assistant is holding the light very close, almost in my frame. In fact, there were a few times he was in my frame. I had to ask him to get out of my frame. And then I had to have a very closed depth of field in order for me to get a slow shutter speed. There's a lot of things going on here. I wanted to show this image. And if this was an in-person type of demonstration, I'd be able to show you. It's pretty cool, though. This is a light painting. This is a 30-second exposure, okay? This was made with a pen light on their faces and a Stella light that was lighting the background. I pressed the shutter button, all right, with a 24-70 lens on my tripod, on my camera and my tripod. And I ran around like a chicken without a head, painting them with the pen light, painting the background with the Stella light. 30 seconds, I also defocused with my lens and then hit the dress a little bit to make it blurred. And then the shutter closed and it was terrible. I completely screwed it up the first time. I nailed it the second time and screwed it up again the third and the fourth and fifth times. So 1 out of 5 isn't bad, right? So my point, trial and error. Not everything's going to work. That's one of the things I love about, and I'll use his name, and I probably mention him at every seminar and workshop, is Joe McNally. He loves showing you some of the things that he's done in terms of his errors. Not everything is perfection. And so being able to show what I've done wrong and being able to learn from it is really, it's imperative to learn from your mistakes. And here's my exposure, and here's all my exposure information is, a 30-second exposure. The less versatile you are, the better you have to be at what you do well. And I learned this during COVID. I had to, what was the word? Pivot, okay? Working myself into a position of total versatility that I can do anything I want at the time I want to do it. Whether I want to do it is another question. And so, I enjoyed weddings, I enjoyed portraits, but then, commercial work. And then I started doing some portraiture, which I really hadn't done much of before. But this is a wonderful way to take your wedding skills and make a couple extra bucks and get more work. And, this is the wonderful, most quintessential example of Rembrandt lighting, because it's a Rembrandt. And that little triangle of light on the right side is really what I try to go for in my portraits. It's allowed me to be versatile. It's allowed me to take my lighting skills and do different genres. I have headshots tomorrow. I'm going to, do a little bit of Rembrandt lighting there. This is my amazing daughter, Allison, who is a third-year med student. So take your skills and, branch out a little bit. This is an actor's portrait. This is 3 lights. This is 1 hair light, 1 back light, and a front light. Just doing different types of lighting. 2 lights from behind them. Light on the background and a light on them. Just a little bit of fill light on him. This is at Citizens Bank Park. Go first place Phillies. I believe the Phils play the Mets tonight. And then portraits, using your lighting skills, being able to step it up a little bit instead of just shooting with natural light or what they'll call available light. Available light's whatever light you got. And this was my Westcott pretty close to them because it was pretty bright, using high-speed sync with a grid. And again, just lighting skills. Window light, just a silhouette with a light going through a translucent background. The translucent background is really cool to use because I can get really neat silhouettes by shining a light through it. Maternity stuff I do, baby stuff I'll do now. So these are all different ways of branching out. Lots of engagement sessions. I had the good fortune of working with Shaquille O'Neal for about a year and a half on an Epson campaign. He was one of the most unique characters I've ever worked with. He was very kind, very funny, just a true professional. And this image makes me laugh all the time. I love this guy. I truly love this guy. He's so great to work with. And that was a lot of fun. A little bit about my workflow afterwards. I'll use something called Aftershoot. Okay, this is a code if you want to take a picture, a screen cap of that. This is a discount code there. So what is it exactly? What is Aftershoot? What is this AI stuff that we're seeing in wedding photography and other types? Well, what I was able to do, I was able to upload many different Lightroom catalogs, which totaled around 30,000 images, and it learned how I like to process. The image on the top was unprocessed. The image on the bottom is processed. That's what it looked like afterwards. It's, before and after. And all I have to do is press a button. Check it out. It's really, really cool. It processes a wedding for me in a matter of minutes, about 6 minutes for 800 images. It's really kind of remarkable. I make the smart previews in Lightroom after I call my wedding, and it's pretty darn cool. So just a little subtle difference there, but subtle sometimes really does it. There's a QR code if you want to take a picture of that. I'll leave that up there for a minute. All right. So talking about your work, your work, taking it very personally, which I do. Sometimes I get upset that I'm stagnant. I'm not getting better. Ansel Adams said 12 significant crops in 1 year or photographs in 1 year is a good crop. And, sometimes I don't make 12 images I like in 5 years because I've been so prolific and have done so many weddings, 1,200 weddings in my career. It's a lot of weddings. And the more you shoot, sure, the better you get and the better your images, but then it's harder and harder to really love your work and have images stand out. I'll just go through a couple here that I've really come to like. And this was a bride sneezing. I'm sorry, a bride. I'm getting a little tongue-tied speaking for an hour and 15 minutes. The horse had an allergy. And she explained to me that the horse had an allergy. I didn't buy it. I didn't know what she meant by that. She got close to this horse on her wedding day. She got sneezed on, and it was really kind of, the only word is hysterical. This was a very touching moment, very touching photo. She wanted to have her dad see her for the first time as she was coming down the steps, and is very traditional, a very Rockwell moment, if you will. And this was a really meaningful picture for me and this bride. So money or art? Jay Maisel, was sitting with me at a he was holding court, if you will, at lunch at Photo Plus one time. And I asked him, I said, what do you tell somebody who's I just don't feel like I'm getting better? And he said, Cliff, it's people like you that I talk to about this, and you got to decide, do you want to make art or do you want to make the money? And I said, well, I have 16-year-old daughters. I'll paraphrase because it was a long story. I said, I have 16-year-old daughters. He said, oh, you didn't tell me that. He said, bleep that. Make the money. The heck with the art. And, take it for what it's worth. So I had a few passion projects, art, if you will. This is Carl Palmer, my very favorite drummer of all time. My favorite group was Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Had the opportunity to photograph him in a very up close, personal way at a very small venue. Love this guy. He's absolutely amazing. And last year I started shooting golf courses, and I was commissioned by, this is Huntington Valley Country Club. And I want to tell you, this is a 26,000 pixel image merged together. I can go into it, but it's a very long explanation, but it's a method that I really enjoyed. And some of these images are, again, between 25 and 30,000 pixels. So these are just some of my passion projects, if you will. And then travel. I love travel photography. This is just some landscape work. I don't do it enough. I do enjoy it when I do it. A couple of these images are in my home. And this was from Maine last year. So, and every so often we're reminded, no matter how jaded we are, I'll show you some of my favorite moments. And I'm just going to kind of go through them quietly because the image speaks for itself. The whole point of taking pictures is so you don't have to say things with words. A picture is a secret about a secret. The more it tells you, the less you know. And then work the moments. Sometimes you give up. I could have given up here, but I knew something was going to happen afterwards. Don't have a one frame at a time mentality. You get something better. First time he saw her, the first time she saw him. The best image is the one that retain their strength and impact over the years, regardless of the number of times they're viewed. She wanted to smell the rose in her bouquet. If it makes you laugh, if it makes you cry, if it rips your heart out, that's a good picture. And I end just about every seminar with this. And if you see an old lady, you'll look long enough if you see her. I'm going to stop the share here. I'm going to answer a couple more questions. No more. That's good. Akiva, if you want to chime in. If not, yeah, that would be great. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Adorama. I want to thank SanDisk. And I'd be remiss if I didn't pop this up one more time. This is the new SanDisk desk drive, which is my workflow solution now. You know, I'm on my laptop, which only has a 2 terabyte hard drive. My home computer only has a 2 terabyte hard drive. Sometimes I'll blow through that an entire weekend and fill my drive, slow them down. This is 8 terabytes, and this is my working drive. I switch, it just hot swap it between my computers, and that is my working drive. Of course, I still back everything up on my others, but I have large capacity drives, 12 terabytes. But this is really a wonderful solution now. But again, I want to thank everyone. Akiva, thank you. Thanks to Adorama as well. That's fine. Again, I want to thank people for bearing with me. I wish I was in person. It's hard to talk to a little green light right there with no one in my studio. But I hope this was fun, educational, and hope somebody learned something.